whose fault is that? Is that the person that's trying to communicate, or is that the person that's not necessarily actively listening to try and think of, what possibly could have been meant?
Before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to introduce to you a brand new segment we'll be incorporating into the Infusion Breakdown Show podcast, our Black-owned business of the week, where we'll be showcasing quality Black-owned businesses for you to support. This week's Black-owned business of the week is the Happy Cafe located in Virginia Beach, where they have excellent food regardless of the time of day, from delicious ham, egg, and cheese croissants for breakfast to amazing crab cakes you can get after 4 p.m. They even have vegan options. I personally recommend the acai bowl, however you want to pronounce it, but be sure to check them out if you haven't already.
It used to be communication is key, then it became comprehension is key, but allow me to present you a third idea. Just because you're communicating doesn't mean that it's effective. On this week's episode of the Infusion Breakdown Show, the Breakdown crew sat in among ourselves to discuss what are the keys to effective communication. Let's see what we come up with.
So the question we have for today, what are the keys to effective communication? Comment below, let us know your opinion. We also have timestamps in the description below as always. Be sure to check them out.
Alrighty, so this is a topic I'm really excited to dive into because I think as we're getting older, it can apply to anyone at any age, to be honest, but we really learn just how true and how important conversation is. So one thing that I've really been honing in on, like we've been pretty much saying for the past however many episodes about how impactful the COVID times have been. The biggest thing that I won't say the biggest thing, but one of the assets that I have attained over the past 18 or so months has been truly honing in on communication, like effective communication and being proactive and really just being honest. Like, I don't know about you guys, but as a young kid, I used to quote unquote tell a lot of stories, or I used to lie a lot to kind of get my way, like try and control the outcomes of the situation, and just kind of being afraid of outcomes that wouldn't necessarily go in my favor, or not allowing an outcome to potentially play out had I have told the truth. So one thing that I really honed in on was like centering myself to where I no longer fear outcomes. Like whatever outcome that comes from me telling the truth, whatever outcome comes from me communicating, that's the outcome that I deserve to live with. Reason being is because effective communication is always going to provide peace in your life. Whether you like the response you get, whether you like the outcome you get, peace is always a short turn around the corner, and you can't ever lose sight of that. For me, I really honed in on being proactive. Like, case in point, I believe with you guys is like no longer waiting until a few episodes or a few weeks before we get things up and going and like trying to figure out a topic. Like really communicating with you guys, or really putting it on paper, because you can communicate with yourself in a lot of ways as well, whether it's journaling or talk to yourself in the mirror, whatever works for you. Those are all ways of effective communication. But it's like truly being proactive and taking the necessary steps to do what needs to be done and get the best result possible. I think the tail end of this question that I worded is like, what are examples that have come from me implementing? I know one thing that I always talk about a lot is like being a single father and like having a successful co-parenting relationship with my son's mother. And the thing is like effective communication is the sole root, like the foundation of our successful co-parenting relationship. Being honest about things that we see with our son, being proactive with things that we see with our son, and then not being afraid to talk about touchy subjects when it comes to them. Like we've talked about it before, like my son has autism, so those are conversations that you may not want to have with each other as far as like things you're seeing, but it's a requirement that you do talk about it, because when it comes to things of that nature, like autism, being proactive can put your child years ahead rather than being years behind when it comes to ABA and just their development. So effective communication has been tremendous for us, because not even with things that come to him, it's, hey, I have doctor's appointment, or I have this, that, and the third coming up. Can you take him at this time, or can he come over a little bit earlier? Can I drop him off? Like, that's all proponents of effective communication, because it creates a comfort zone, not just as far as like, things go to die in a comfort zone, but it creates a comfort level per se, to where it allows somebody to come to you with, not really fearing whatever answer you may have. That person knows that you're going to shoot them straight. I
Yeah.
think that's like the most ideal situation.
What level of responsibility do you take when it comes to communication in a relationship like that you just detailed? Like in
I
terms
think
of you having to
it's
improve it.
I think it's a very big thing. Like, what I'll say is this: my biggest thing in life has always been, I don't really want somebody else to tell me how to live my life. I don't want somebody to dictate my terms. And when I think of stuff like child support, or if I think of like a mediator having to get involved, I always look at it from a perspective of, all these things could be avoided if you just communicated properly. Like, if you put your differences aside. So I felt like I didn't only owe it to myself, I owed it to the situation as a whole, to be an effective communicator, regardless of how I felt, or regardless of, what things have occurred in the past. Like, I owed it to myself first and foremost, and then I owed it to the situation as well, to just be honest and effective with my communication. Like, I think I played just as big of a role in being an effective communicator as she does, because it's a two-part thing, or two-part process.
Do you feel like you were the one to initiate the improvement?
No, because I feel like she's always been incredibly honest. Like, I think that she's always been the person to communicate. And like I said, my biggest thing has always been, I've tried to dictate outcomes. So she was always, throughout our relationship, like, not afraid to say what I may not want to hear. And I felt like I owed it to myself, and I owed it to her to, not necessarily in the same formats per se, or same circumstances, but I owed it to her to at least up my communication skills to be level with her, because she's an introvert extrovert. Like, she likes to be to herself, but she's not afraid to communicate and be out there, whether I'd like to be like this quote unquote mastermind thinker. Like, I like to try and think of all possible outcomes, and while thinking of these all possible outcomes, I'm like not communicating, because I'm trying to pick what's the best outcome that I want, instead of just understanding that a lot of stuff is written in stone before it even happens. Like, if you're paying attention to all of these actions and words that are being spoken, it all leads to a predictable outcome. And I think, instead of me trying to like dictate what outcome I get, I just need to have solace in understanding that whatever reaction I get has already been predetermined, and it's either the universe teaching me a lesson, or the universe is rewarding me for sticking to what I'm supposed to do, and just be effective and honest with the words I say.
Solid. As always, I do appreciate the maturity that goes into that.
Sure. I think being an effective communicator has benefited us a lot as well, like as a trio, because there's no longer like, we have to record at 6 and somebody's being hit up at like 5 and like, hey, I don't feel like recording, can we do Tuesday? So you've spent your entire day like preparing or rushing to get stuff done, just for things to get pushed back. Like, I think we've benefited a lot from not just my communication, but everybody's communication as a whole, because it allows us to be human and understand that shit happens.
Yeah.
But we still owe it to each other to give adequate time to prepare, or adequate time to get things moved around for a later date.
Yeah. It's like you said, like, shit is gonna happen, but it's about how you deal with it.
Sure.
And I will agree with that and echo that sentiment, to where I do think that we've improved drastically over the 3-year tenure that we've been doing this.
You can go, Brian. Next.
Thank you. So polite. So when I was thinking about what makes communication effective, or what are the keys to effective communication, of course, there's 2 parts. And so the first and most neglected portion of it is listening, of course. And so I remember there was a TED talk by this woman named Celeste Headley, and she gave an interesting fact. I had to go back and listen to it to make sure I got it exactly, but we have the ability to listen almost twice the speed that we do when we're speaking for the average person. So what that means is that while you're talking, your mind is moving faster than I'm able to speak. So we fill in the empty space with our thoughts racing. Therefore, we don't concentrate on things. And so that lends itself to the idea of the human mind racing and not being fully attentive in conversation, which I feel like we all struggle from time to time, depending on the subject matter, the person, the space, whatever condition you're in at the moment. And so I just wanted to share that part first. And so along the lines of listening, I do think that the second thing is being present. And we did a whole episode on why people struggle to be present, but really forcing ourselves to be present and in the moment to experience and understand. And then also to assume that the other person that you're speaking with knows something that you don't, because, okay, it may be a conversation where you're talking for 10 minutes and only 1 minute of that is actually something that teaches you something, but that 1 minute could change your life. And I always try to adopt that mindset. That comes directly from 12 Rules for Life, Answer to Chaos. That's actually rule number 9. And so that's my thoughts on listening. I can't really stress the importance of listening enough. I feel like we tend to focus more on the speaking portion of communication than we do with listening, which I don't think is up for debate here. I think we all can pretty much agree with that. But when it comes to the active or the more active part, because you should actively listen, I feel like there are 3 parts to speaking. So it's honesty, tactfulness, and then timely. And so honest, I think outside of the traditional context of telling the truth, I feel like it also applies to being honest with yourself first. And so I can't count how many times I've been in conversation with someone and they weren't honest with themselves. So they'll say, oh, I'm not angry, but okay, you were just slamming cabinets or something like that. So if you don't know how to properly label your feelings and be accurate with yourself, because they truly deny it. They feel like, okay, I'm not angry. They don't feel like they want to label it that because it's the way it's perceived, even though it's a normal human emotion. But if you're not honest with yourself, how are you going to be honest with me? So therefore, by default, the communication isn't effective. And then I guess that also manifests itself in saying that I'm okay, and then just sweeping shit under the carpet when in fact it's not okay, as opposed to saying, okay, something's off here. I don't feel good. I need some more time to talk about this. Cool. I would say that's a more effective way of handling that. And along the lines of honesty as well, I would say not getting out on technicalities, because a lot of times people will say, okay, well, I didn't lie because I told the truth, but I just left out X, Y, and Z. Well, I feel like that's just deceptive. And so by default, withholding information and deceiving people, I try to think about how I feel in those situations, if that was to be happening to me, or the impact of it, because provided the full context of the situation, that could completely change the way you behave, interact, the way you process it, your response, all that. And then the second part about tactfulness. So thinking about, is it helpful? Because a lot of people get fascinated with the idea of brutal honesty. And by filtering it through this lens, you actually are able to remove a lot of the crap. And so by asking yourself, is it helpful? Is it going to be conducive and move either the relationship forward or the situation, the problem? Then that allows you to strip away stuff like I said. But then also asking yourself, does this need to be said? Because I think the most common way that this is brought forth is people bringing up issues that aren't relevant. So we're talking about, I guess, me, I don't know. I wish I had an example. Okay, me not following up to commitments and saying doing things I said I was gonna do. And so we're having a conversation about that. You call me out on something and I start making up something like, okay, well, you were late. So I feel like that's something that derails a conversation. There was actually a conversation I had with an attorney during a leadership course, and he was saying I had done something like that in a speaking exercise, because he had set up a conversation for us. He's like, okay, you guys talk about this. He was going to analyze us. And one of the pieces of feedback he gave us, because I had done that brilliantly to derail the conversation when I was being reprimanded by my manager in that scenario, But he stopped it. He said, this is what people do when they don't have anything else to do. He said, don't have stupid arguments. So if you're focusing on one thing, try to keep it as subject as possible. Like if somebody's gonna try to derail and talk about minor details or something that's completely unrelated, stay out of that realm. And I think that's something we should do to ourselves, and have that lens and think about, okay, well, is what I'm about to say, is it actually in line with the main cause? If not, then maybe it's something you need to revisit later. Not everything needs to be crammed into one discussion. I think that's particularly relevant in relationships with significant others and people who you're really close with. Lesser so to coworkers and I guess lesser acquaintances, but still pertinent nonetheless. And then the last part I had was timely. And so is the information delivered in a fashion to where it's still helpful? Because as you said, Des, like with us for a scheduling example, if you tell me that you can't make a recording at 6 o'clock, if you tell me at 5 o'clock, that the time by which I get the answer for that, it dictates my schedule a lot. So like I could have went back home to visit, which is a few hours away. And so I'm rushing back home so I can record. And then I find out like an hour after, I'm like 30 minutes out and say, okay, well, I can't record. It's like, well, damn, I could have stayed a whole extra day. So just thinking about the consequences and being considerate of other people and how the time and also the content of your information that you're providing to them has the ability to affect and influence them. So I think that's a fairly comprehensive analysis as far as I was able to put together about communication. And I'd be curious to see if you guys had any thoughts on anything that I've said or any points of contention.
You want to go first, Des? I agree with everything you said, though.
I did.
Yeah,
I did too. But I wanted to touch on because there's a example that you brought up, and then I think I may have lost you. But you're essentially talking about the diversion technique, and then you kind of mentioned how like that's something that, were you saying that it should be used towards like your loved ones and your family members, like in the situation where it's your manager, or?
No, I was saying that.
Are you saying how? I'm sorry, go ahead. I'll let you.
No, I'll let you finish to make sure I'm answering your question correctly. I want to listen.
So were you saying it in the sense of like you? I don't even know how to word the question, because like I said, I'm a little confused as far as like the understanding of it. Because when you were talking about like the diversion technique, I was just thinking of like the importance of staying on topic, because when it comes to like a say like for example you're in an argument with your significant other, and I think this is like one of the most common things we see women talk about a lot, is that when they're bringing up what their qualm is with you, men will try and divert it into like, I guess, try and nullify their or what I'll say is this: men will wait until the woman has an issue to bring up what their issue is as a means to like water down what her issue is. And I was kind of thinking of that diversion technique when you were mentioning what your manager's bringing up. And like I said, I think there was a misstep on my end as far as like the understanding when you brought up like the family aspect.
Nah, it seems like I think you have a pretty comprehensive understanding, but I'll explain it again. So the idea, I said that it's more important in like our intimate relationships with the people we care about that we're closer with,
okay.
But it's also applicable to work. And the reason I say that is because of the ramifications of it. So let's say if you have those kind of conversations, somebody derails at work. Okay, let's think you might be in a meeting for 15 more minutes, or I guess the timeline for a project is pushed out a few days. But if you let that shit happen in your relationship and you keep letting it fester, okay, that could be the end of the relationship, whether it's with your significant other or somebody who you're closely acquainted with, like a friend or somebody else in your family.
Yeah, that's the clarity I needed, because I was like, man, I'm on board with you when you were talking about the diversion technique, but I'm like, well, if you're saying it's really important with the family, then I'm like, man, that shit not adding up.
Yeah.
But no, we're solid. And I understood exactly, what you were getting at. That I think it was just maybe a few pieces I missed because I wasn't actively listening. What you got for us, Josh?
Like I said, I do agree with everything you guys said. For me, what I had was basically being direct and being honest. That was really the main thing, because I feel like a lot of people try to be direct, but they're not like completely direct. They hold stuff out, like Brian said. So I do think that's one of the big things, like make sure you're being direct and being completely honest, because if you hold stuff back, it could cause some problems in the future. That's what I really had. And as far as like ineffective communication as a whole, I do think this is like one of the like top 3 biggest problems in society, to be honest with you, communication as a whole. And I like ineffective communication really annoys me, because I see it all the time. Like I would see it like with my parents. They'll say something to each other, but they don't completely understand each other, so they're yelling at each other now because they didn't completely understand. And I'm sitting in the background as a third party, like, he really meant this, but she took it as that, or something like that. And it's not even just with my parents. Like I'll see that with a lot of people, and it's annoying because they're not listening to the point that they're like, oh shit, you really meant something else, because I'm saying it as a third party. I'm like, no, they really meant like this, but they just explained it a certain way. You took it as something else. So yeah, that's the biggest, like, experiencing ineffective communication is something I see all the time, and it's really annoying. So that's why I pride myself on being really an effective communicator. No matter if we're playing Call of Duty, like you guys said in the fucking group chat right now with the podcast, making sure we want to record on Tuesday. I think I told you like 2 weeks ago, like it was like early in the day, I was like, nah, I don't feel like recording today. Let's do Tuesday. Like, nah, not today. So yeah, I really pride myself being an actual effective communicator, because I do think that's one of the biggest problems. And yeah, man, I think it's really annoying too. Like it annoys me to the point, because how ineffective it can be between people though. But yeah, but like I said, I do agree with everything you said. I do think the main thing though is just being direct, being honest. Yeah, just being direct and being honest, because because without that, you could just cause problems into the future, basically.
I agree with you about how problematic, to which degree, to say it's like top 3 problems, I don't know, but I will say that that's one of the biggest problems that people face as a whole. And I've noticed as a general phenomenon that communication is one of those things that people tend to grossly overestimate their abilities and think that they're good at it. It's one of those like soft skills, such as parenting or relationships, that we think that we don't need to learn about. And there's no shortage of books, of subject matter that you can study, people that you can reference, brilliant orators, speakers, authors, all kinds of folks that you can learn from, and to teach you become better and more effective in your communication. And we tend to, I guess this is a losing battle, is to push for everyone to adopt those resources and make best use of them. But I really, it's a little bit disheartening, honestly, to see that there's such a wealth of knowledge, but people still refuse to take it up because they feel like that's just a natural skill. Just because you have the ability to speak and make sounds with your vocal cords, that you're a good communicator, when that's clearly not the case.
You think they don't do it because they feel they're a good communicator already?
Yes.
I don't know. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I do. A lot of people won't even bother to crack a book on that because they feel like they haven't figured out.
Never thought about it. You think so, Des?
I don't know, man. I think I see a lot of people like maybe admit that they're not really good at communicating. Like I mean, I'm not afraid to admit that I suck at communicating, because I think for the most part, like a lot of people have an arrogance within themselves to where they feel like they maybe don't need to communicate. Like I still have that issue at work. Like part of me is very free-minded and very independent thinking, to where like if there's something that I'm working on, I don't take the time out of the day to communicate and say, hey, I'm working on this. Like my time is much more value and dedicated to getting the resolution than it is to inform somebody that I'm working on finding a resolution that may take a little bit more time. So like don't get me wrong, I'm very I guess you could say developed as far as communication goes, like being an effective communicator, but there's still times that like I sit back and acknowledge, like, yeah, I really have a hard time being effective when it comes to, I guess you could say, authority per se. Like not authority as far as like maybe like cops or whatever you're gonna be, like parents or whatever, but when it comes to like management, like I definitely have a hard time being an effective communicator to them, because it's like you have to go out of your way to be an effective communicator with them. Like, it's you being very, very proactive and literally dotting all your I's and crossing your T's, because I think it's very time centered. Like, you have to communicate in a timely manner when it comes to them. Like, it's, when I say timely manner, I mean like it's on the spot. Like, they need to know pretty much as the action is occurring. Whether, as like the example we gave, like we have like a plethora of time to like say, hey, I don't feel like shooting the podcast today. We can do Tuesday. Or if it's a relationship based, conversation, like you have time to let whatever's bothering you marinate, and then you have that conversation. Whereas when it's like, your job or whatever, communication is required on the spot.
And say your manager, I'm not feeling good. I don't want to talk about this right now.
Yeah.
Come back tomorrow.
Like, you don't get that luxury. So I'll admit, like, as good as I have gotten at communication, like, there's still aspects of it that I need to definitely get better at. Like, even there's times that I have to get better at, communicating with myself. There's times where I'm not meditating, or there's times where I'm not taking, dedicated portions out of my day to journal. Like, those are all like ways of effective communication. Like, we talked on the podcast like maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago, and I said, like, there are times that I struggle to articulate what it is that I want to say in the manner that I'm saying it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a blame thing for me. Like, I need to get better at doing that. I need to get better at versing myself with whatever subject that I'm going to be talking about, or being comfortable in my setting to say what needs to be said. And like, that leads to the question, like, when it comes to the example that you were giving, Josh, about your parents, like, whose fault is that? Is that the person that's trying to communicate, or is that the person that's not necessarily actively listening to try and think of, what possibly could have been meant?
It's both.
I think the person who's trying to communicate has a little bit more responsibility. Maybe that's just me taking a more hands-on approach.
It's possible. I'm just thinking of the actual example of my parents, though, as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was more or less with Brian on that one too, because one thing that I think we all do this. Like, if we communicate something and we don't get the reaction that we were anticipating, we kind of like imaginary, or we don't do it in action in the moment. We kind of scratch our heads, like the proverbial head scratch when something is done or said that isn't the way you anticipated.
Yeah.
So then I always think like, well, maybe I need to try and tweak a word to this, and I'll say, well, no, this is actually what I meant. Like, that's something that my godbrother is very good at. Like, if he sees a conversation, like the energy of a conversation going a way that he did not anticipate, he'll be like, well, maybe you're taking it this way, and this is the way that I meant it to try. And again, what's a key component of this is like not accusing. Well, you're taking it this way in an accusatory manner. It's like, well, are you taking it this way because this is the way that I meant it, per se. So that's why I feel like the onus is kind of on the person that's communicating, because you can anticipate the reaction that you're supposed to get. And if it's not what you anticipated, then I feel like it's your responsibility to look at, well, what did I say and how can I correct or tweak what was said for that person to understand it better.
I agree. But sometimes the other person's just not listening though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you have to do your due diligence. You can't take that into account.
Of course.
I mean,
yeah.
You have to. I think the best way to go about that, we actually had a training for this, well, a segment from a training at work. And it was a professor who came to speak, and he was saying essentially to meet people where they were at. So if I want to tell you something and communicate an idea effectively to you, it serves me best to not dumb it down for you, because you're a smart guy. Maybe you may be in a different industry, for example, you're not in the tech world like I am, but communicate it in a way that you can easily comprehend it. Because if I'm saying things and just throwing words at you that are advanced concepts you've never experienced before, then is it really effective? Because I think the idea of effective communication is to make sure that the message is understood and received well. And so who has more responsibility with that? You or whatever hardhead person you're talking to?
I got you. I was going to ask, don't you have to be in the right mind state to effectively communicate? Because Des mentioned like being at work and not wanting to necessarily communicate with his managers. Could he just not be in
that's
the
the
right
thing, though.
mind state?
That's the
Okay.
thing though. Like I'm very good at doing energy checks throughout my day, and I know for a fact that that's just like an internal thing with me. Like I'm so big on wanting to be my own person and dictating what it is I do throughout my day and managing my own time, that I've always, like, since I've been a kid, was like had a problem with communicating effectively in a timely manner when it comes to authority figures. Like there would be times where like I'd have to get a progress report signed, and like I didn't want my mom, even when I had good grades, like I just had a very hard time going to get approval or signatures or things of that nature for things that were so minuscule. And it's like the same thing, except like I don't fear whatever my manager's reaction is going to be. I'm just so caught up in my moment, or not feeling the importance or necessity to communicate in that moment because it doesn't directly serve me. Like that, me telling you that I have something to work on doesn't serve me. It allows you to know what it is I'm working on. So if somebody asks you what I'm working on, then you have a response. And so it's like, I don't, it's so hard to understand. It's so hard to like break down to where like it sounds rational, but I mean, fact of the matter is, it's a very irrational, like phase of communication that I'm stuck in for whatever reason. Like I do my best. Like don't get me wrong. There's moments where like I will communicate to my manager or leaders what it is I'm doing, but it's like after I've already been working on it for like 10 minutes. Yeah. And it's like that afterthought, like, oh, well, maybe I do need to let them know what I'm doing. Let me go ahead and type it in while I'm at a breaking point within my thought of what it is I'm trying to resolve. Like, let me go ahead and type it in the chat and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. Whereas like a lot of people in my group at work, like they're very proactive. If they have something they need to work on, they're asking. Whereas I just go and I work on it and I tell you after the fact.
See, I think that's a good thing and a bad thing just from my perspective, because you are getting things done. But let's say if you don't tell your manager and they assign somebody else to work on the same thing, I could see that could be potentially detrimental. You have two people working on the same thing and wasting time. But I think that this is just a hypothesis of mine, and feel free to shoot it down. But do you think perhaps your stance on, I guess, communicating with your manager has something to do with your, like, a visceral reaction to being micromanaged? Like you seem like you're pretty against it just from me knowing you.
Yeah.
And
I'm
so,
totally
so you perceive the fact that you're giving them an update as micromanagement because you tend to prefer to work alone or be left alone to do something once you've been given a task.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a sound, it's a sound take on what could potentially be the issue. I think it's a very solid theory or hypothesis. Well, they're one and the same, to be honest. But yeah, I think that's a good take on it. Jeez, I forgot what I was about to say.
Micromanagement?
No, it was a response to yours. It was like very unnecessary. But I also say in that case, like in my line of work, we work directly with a client, so it's not like there are times to where our managers will assign us something, but for the most part, like clients call in and we assist them on the spot. So it's like the I guess you could say the desire to just get shit done and not have to ask for permission to get shit done. It's the really I think it all boils down to it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Like I really do think that's my biggest issue when it comes to communication.
I agree with you, Des, when it comes to how you feel at work, and I do agree with Brian that it could be a part of micromanaging because I hate that too. One thing I do at work too that I don't necessarily always communicate, but until after the fact, is when I'm with a kid and I start on something new, like I continue actual lesson to the next thing they're supposed to be doing, and then I might tell the supervisor after the fact. That's not bad. I mean, it's still me communicating, but it's also me taking initiative. You know what I mean? So I do agree with Brian when he says it could be good and bad because you are actually doing something. But at the same time, you don't want to have like the management think that you're doing like two things at once, or people are doing the same thing. So it's kind of different in my field. Like it's good for me. So I do that a lot as far as like going ahead, because I mean, if I'm going to be in where my manager is going to be like in that position, then I think I should be taking those responsibilities. So, I mean, it's good, but at the same time, you got to make sure you communicate on the back end too. I don't really always have to communicate, because what I do enters into a computer where the management team is going to see it anyway. So like, oh, he started this today, so okay, gotcha, boom. He doesn't have to necessarily, like, I can indirectly communicate that to you through the computer. You know what I mean? I don't have to necessarily text you every time I do something new with the kid. Like, oh, I'm doing this today, yada yada. You know what I mean? So I do think it depends, but I understand exactly what you guys are talking about.
Sure. I've
Just
honestly,
speaking-
go ahead.
But just speaking from a management perspective, because I do have, I swear, I think I have a team of like 9 people now. But just from my perspective from leadership, I do appreciate when the people that I work directly with, when they're forthcoming with stuff, because that lets me know that there's somebody that I can trust. Because if shit hits the fan, I know that they're going to be honest with me. I'm not going to find out about the project going south on Friday when it's been going bad Monday through, So I think that's being more forthcoming and being more communicative to your manager or people in positions of authority. That does have that added benefit because it garners trust in the relationship. And so that's when it comes to somebody who does and doesn't do that, I most certainly want the person who does, if that's the only difference.
In cases like that, I think it's a good example. But even with myself, I know to communicate when shit goes bad. Like, I'm not after the fact at work. Like, this is, of course, something I've got better with at time, because there are times where shit has gone south and then I'll choose to communicate later. But for me, I definitely, because Josh and I have had the, managerial experience too, of course, on a smaller scale. But like, I definitely appreciated, my supervisees that would come out and, tell me when shit needed to be done. Like, not me having to do maintenance on my own and find out and say, well, somebody's been looking at this, we're 7 days a week. So somebody's been looking at this every day this week, and now it's Sunday and it's just now, being addressed. Like, I definitely do appreciate during my time as a manager, having those employees that were very proactive. Like, I hated it in a sense because it was like, now I got more work to do or more work to assign. But as a manager, like, I'm very proud in the work that I do. So like, I was a great manager to work with because I always communicated what needed to be done. But I was also very great as a manager, not trying to fill my own cup or whatever. I was also very great as a manager because I would oftentimes do it myself. Like, I would assign some work that, hey, any Bob, Billy, Joe, or Sally can get this part done, but this I want to do, and I wanted to make sure that it got done correctly. So I definitely agree with you as far as like when it comes to having supervisees, like, you want those people that will communicate effectively and not tell you. I know Josh may remember this example that I'm about to give, but like, we had a birthday party that we were hosting at Cloud9, and it was a Sunday, early morning. For the most part, not a lot of the stores that we got our supplies from were open, and we had no cups, no plates. And we have somebody that throughout the week, I believe they do it early in the week, like on a Tuesday, count supplies. And we didn't know until the Sunday that party came in after the fact that he needed supplies orders. It wasn't that supplies were ordered early in the week and they were on their way. It was that he knew early in the week that supplies had not been ordered and didn't tell anybody until we had addressed him about it. And it was just like, I was so mad that day that I punched the electrical box in our break room, because it's just like, it was a Eurpean family, and if you know like anything about Eurpean families, like, they're very to the point about how they feel. Like, they don't sugarcoat anything. And there's like, so here we are at 10 a.m. on a Sunday, and you guys don't even have, like, what are we paying this money for? Like, they were very to the point. Like, sometimes, I don't know if you've ever dealt with like a passive-aggressive customer. Well, we'll just say aggressive, but
Assertive?
But it's aggressive.
Okay.
We can say assertive, but they're afraid to be assertive or aggressive. Like, they want to ask for that refund, but they want to ask for it in a passive tone while aggressively talking to you about everything you didn't do. Like, oh, I feel like we should get a refund, or maybe we should be getting a refund for this. It's like, you're damn right. Maybe you should be getting a refund, but I'm not gonna give you that shit. But just being in that situation, man, it was so uncomfortable because your ability to control the situation or the possible outcome has been altered severely because you didn't get adequate time to prep for what needed to be said or what needed to be done. It's like in a moment, like you're like you fail a class, but you're waiting until the final day to get your results, and your parents are checking your grades. I don't know if you had it in high school, but at our high school, from all my years, like my parents could check my grades online, and so they're addressing me in my grades as our teachers are inputting them in, and I'm like, damn, I can't even come up with no lie as to why I got an F on this test. Like, you saw me playing the Xbox last night. Like, I don't even have a chance to lie about something. So, it's like in those situations where you have literally no control over the outcome, whether it be both good or bad, like those are the situations that I hate the most. But
yeah, one job. Yeah, one job. Yo,
yeah,
that's wild.
literally,
That shit like that is annoying as fuck. Like, shit like that is annoying.
Brian, I know that's a cliche, like you had one job, but he literally had one job. Like, he didn't have to do any of the stuff that we had to do. His one job was to be a party coordinator and make sure supplies were stocked and make sure that parties were good. Like, that's literally
I couldn't do it.
job. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like he was terrible at what he did, but it was like it's like in those moments where you're needed the most, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. And I think, as much as I hate, this it's very harsh truth, is like those are the moments that people remember the most.
Yeah, I'd be in line with agreeing with that.
But I know we've given a lot of examples or what we perceive to be like effective communication. Like, what's the number one thing like that everybody has given? What's the number one thing, like, if we can have like a consensus on the most effective part of communication?
For me, I think it's just being honest, like just making sure you're honest, because I feel a lot of people aren't just completely honest with everything. And one thing I was actually going to add was, I feel like you have to have some sort of empathy. I think Brian mentioned this a little bit, but having some sort of empathy I think is really big when it comes to effective communication.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can like talk to somebody and say you're honest to them and everything like that, but it's how you say it too, you know what I mean? I feel, because sometimes on the game, and my niece Reagan comes into me and wants to talk to me. I'm like, Reagan, you don't see me trying to focus on the game right quick? Like, what are you doing? Like, can you wait a little bit? Like, what's going on? So I think empathy is good too, because after that I always feel bad. Like, Reagan, come back. What do you want? Come back. What do you want? So I think empathy is a big one. And I think everybody should have at least a little bit of it, because without that, you just go into certain situations being completely honest and being completely cruel, and a lot of people can't handle that. So I think that's
Or should they have to?
That too, yeah. They don't have to.
Des, to answer your question about, I guess, what's the consensus of the overarching theme that came about this conversation, I want to say the initiative that the communicator should take in the interaction between the two parties. And I know that's something that you and I agree on. Josh, I don't think that you were necessarily explicit when it came to that. But I think that was a really big takeaway, because us as people, the three of us, I know personally, are trying to continually improve ourselves and look for ways to, I guess, minimize the amount of headaches in our life. And communication is probably one of the biggest ones that you can start with immediately. Like, communication will affect your career trajectory, it will affect your relationships, it will affect everything. There's no single facet of your life that won't be improved by your communication skills. And so I think that by taking the initiative and owning that, because if you don't take the time to improve in these things and work that muscle, no one else is going to do it for you. There's no way that anybody else can make you better communicating.
I agree. I do feel like I am a very good communicator, and at the same time, I do try to push other people when I feel like they're having trouble with communicating. Like, I try to push them, like, why don't you communicate better? Why don't you actually explain what you want to do? And even when I'm talking to somebody, I always try to make sure I say it in a way that they can successfully understand it and everything like that. So there's no type of confusion or anything. So I do agree with you. Like the initiator should definitely make sure he understands what he's saying and make sure he articulates it in a proper way to the person that is he's trying to communicate to. But I do feel listening is a part of that too. But I do agree with you. Yeah.
I mean, that could be part of removing the boundary, because I mean, thinking about before I tell you what I have to say and talk my shit, I should listen to you and understand where you're coming from and understand like your frame of mind. So it could be saying that, okay, well, Josh, maybe just based off of your demeanor and the things you said thus far, maybe it's not a good time to have a discussion like that. Or maybe there's something that you have on your chest that needs to be addressed before I can say what I have to say. So I think that's where the listening component goes into the role of a communicator as well.
Gotcha.
Des, what do you have for the, I guess, big takeaway?
So I really loved what we were able to break it down to, like empathy and then, the initiative. I think for me, my biggest takeaway from this conversation and what I feel like is the most important, moving forward, like something that I want to practice and when it comes to my communication is being present. Like, I feel like if we strip everything away that we've said today, where it be miscommunications or, even want to talk about empathy or we want to talk about the most common form of ineffective communication, I think all of that is resolved by just being present. Like we touched on how is it the person who's communicating or is it the person that listening at fault when ineffective communication comes about? But I think being present negates that, because when you're present, there's this. It's really hard to explain, but everyone knows when they're truly present. Like there's a feel. There's no fear of the past. There's no fear of the future. Like you're in that moment, and you're responsive to all possible factors that come with being present in that moment. And I honestly, truly think that with the proper work on yourself and, the constant repetition, like being present is really a big part of effective communication, or I honestly think now after having a conversation, the most intricate part of effective communication, because everything else that we talked about today is encompassed in being present. Being present allows you to empathize because you're understanding those emotions as they come to you, and you're responding appropriately. You're not thinking about the argument you had with your girlfriend. You're not thinking about the fears of tomorrow. You're not thinking about all that. You're present in the moment. And as far as initiative goes, when you're present in the moment, you know what needs to be done to get to point A to point B. Hey, your manager needs to be notified of this, so you can get adequate time, because a lot of it is just like your manager wanting to know how much time you need on a project. That's really all it is. But it's like you rob them of being proactive on their end by being reactive on your end. So I really do think that being present, I think that's something that we'll continue to talk about in the future as we have on podcasts in the past. But I honestly think that being present is the most important form of communication, because it allows you to do things like I said my godbrother did, where if you're receiving something how he's not intending, then you have the wherewithal to take it a few steps back and like, hey, you may be interpreting it this way, I'm not sure, but this is how I like trying to communicate it to you, so you understand exactly what I'm saying. And if that's your same response, great. If it's not, great. We know which way to go from there. Like, I think that that's so important, because being present, it just allows you to stick with who you are. Like, if you're not present and a certain conversation happens, you may blow up, and you're stuck with the regret of blowing up in that moment. Like, what was said in that moment is now it's been spoken. It's in the universe. It's out there. That person now has to deal with what you said, whether you meant it or not. Like that's there. So it's a very intricate part of communication, man. Like especially effective communication. Like I came into the podcast, like I was really, I didn't have like a list. Like I knew that, how we are as a group, everything will be organic and our thoughts will ferment as we put them out there. And like, being present, I think, is really the most important. I definitely love the empathy and the initiative aspect, because those I feel like are just important, but I think being present encompasses all of those.
I would agree with that, actually.
Appreciate
It's
it.
interesting. Yeah. That's good. What would you guys say the last thing you guys communicated to somebody that you guys felt like really good about?
Being honest when it's hard to be honest. And I know that's very, very vague, but so the concept of like, I guess one common thing that I've noticed is that people can handle the truth when they don't like it. It'll be hard at first, but they'll adjust and respect you for that.
Like, yeah.
But when you lie to them, what you're doing, you're snatching the carpet from under them, because they have the idea, reality is one thing, and then all of a sudden they're thrust into this other thing. And that's a huge takeaway that my dad taught me when I was younger. He was like, I can deal with it. I don't care if I don't like the what you're telling me, but as long as you're honest, he's fine with it. He could take me being honest. So I could just took that mindset moving forward. And I really try to apply that. So I guess a specific example was being transparent when it came to dating. And I guess a woman having the idea, or she was asking, was she the only one that I would be interested in going on a date with at that point in time? And I said, like, I understand the consequences, because so my idea is it's okay to date multiple people. I mean, dating is just getting to know each other. We had this conversation, so you know my stance on it. And I mean, once you're committed in a relationship, things change for certain. Like, that's all that's done. But I guess there was she had a different level of understanding of that, and so I understand that could have been a potential turnoff and ended that. But I stuck by. I was honest about the way I felt, my stance on it, and ultimately she respected that. So I mean, we're still cool, but I feel like that was something that I was really proud of, because despite me potentially not getting quote unquote the outcome that I wanted, or what most people would want, I still stood on what I believed in.
Yeah, I echo that to the T, because my biggest thing is you tell the truth. If it's the outcome you don't want, you're stuck with the emotions, but it's better than saying it in that moment and having to deal with the emotions then than the truth coming out later and then having to deal with everything that has been done from that moment you had to tell the truth to the moment the truth comes out. And, you know, for me, it's like I struggle with sometimes dealing with the emotions of telling the truth, because it's always that what if. Like, I had the battling with my, I guess you want to say, my inner child, or my the flaws of my inner child. Like, I had the ability to dictate an outcome, and I chose not to. I chose to just let whatever was in store for me be in store and come to fruition. And I found that by doing that, whatever fallout you experience during that time is temporary. It's like you don't battle mentally, like thinking, well, damn, what if I would have told the truth then? Like, this potential outcome would have been like you're stuck with dealing with what outcome came. Like, your mind isn't thinking up all of these other, possible outcomes that, damn, if I would have told the truth, or if I would have told a partial bit of the truth. Like, you're just stuck with the truth. Like, you're stuck with what is versus what if. And we all know that what is a very straight path, whereas what is that maze trying to get to that point of sanity. So, I definitely will echo that. Like, for me, it was sexual history. So, some people don't like to hear that. Some do. And, I didn't like the response that I got, but I was able to move on from it a lot faster than what would have happened had I not told the truth right then.
Right. When you tell the truth, regardless of the outcome, that's the best possible thing to happen to you.
It's interesting. Yeah, I agree with you guys. When you was talking about your dad and what your dad taught you, it kind of reminds me of Malcolm X quote I always think about when I'm thinking about, like, should I talk about this? Like, he says, so early in my life, I had to learn that if you wanted something, you better make some noise. And I always remember that, like, you better speak up and talk and say what you actually want if you want anything to become better. But I agree. Yeah, actually getting it out and actually making sure you're completely honest and be like, okay, no matter what the outcome is, I got it out and I made sure I let them know like how I actually feel. For me, it was like I once told a girl like the sex is boring. Like I'm getting bored with the sex in this relationship. You know what I mean? So that was my quarrel, and I told her like every time we have sex, it seems like I'm trying to please you instead of you trying to please me, or we trying to do it to each other. You know what I mean? So I said that, and even afterwards, I felt better. Like she took it how it was. She was like, you know, because imagine like telling a girl like sex is boring to a woman. You know what I mean? Like imagine saying that. Like what the fuck? Like it's not that you're like unattractive, it's just like what you're doing is not on par with what I want. You know what I mean? So, and yeah, I do agree. Like it's about getting it out and being as honest as possible. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. No matter what the outcome is, no matter if you're like, no, fuck you, nigga, fuck, you know, fuck this, I know, fuck, you know, no matter what. Yeah, I mean, I said it. You know, I communicated how I wanted to. So, I think that's the biggest thing, though. But yeah, it just reminds me of the actual Malcolm X quote, like, if you want something, you better make some noise. That's what I always think about.
I guess after hearing all three of our responses to that, I think that one thing that I've noticed about communication and how it affects relationships specifically is that one thing that people tend to discount is the fact they say, okay, well, communication is key. Communication is key. You need to be a better communicator. And all that, but I don't think people really understand the idea behind when you are an effective communicator, or when you practice it, inherently you get better and it improves the relationship over time. So like the communication, like with you having that difficult conversation, I'm pretty sure she didn't want to hear that. It probably was hard for you to say that too. You probably felt uncomfortable being that.
Of course, you was thinking before, of course, I was thinking beforehand, like, do I really want to say this? Like, fuck it.
Exactly. But as a consequence, I don't know what happened afterwards. And I mean, that's neither here nor there. But in that lies a potential for both people to improve and satisfy each other even better. Even if it was something like you said with the sexual expectations or sexual satisfaction, or however you want to put it, or whether it could be expectations over dinner, like, damn, this dinner sucked. Or, I mean, you wouldn't say it like that, obviously, but like maybe you should try doing this, or I really didn't like that. You know, just that goes back to what I was saying about tact. But as a consequence, you're able to be more authentic, because if you have any kind of relationship with people where there's no kind of conflict, someone's not being genuine. There's some layer of fictitiousness that somebody is putting up. And I feel like if you don't communicate, and if you don't have those kind of difficult conversations, because they're bound to be something that there's some kind of degree of disagreement on, then it's not really benefiting you. But I think the ultimate goal of communication in relationships is to improve, not just to fix shit, but improve and be better.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what should come out of it, some type of improvement. But yeah, I agree. If you have anything else, I wouldn't mind wrapping up there.
And print.
Yeah, I think I'm satisfied. I mean, I was prepared, but we're good.
Okay. Yeah. So you have a recommendation of the week, Des?
Yeah, bro. So the last two, catch a sunset or sunrise, take a hike. I did both. I went up to the Hawksbill Loop in the Shenandoah Mountain, whatever you want to call it. And it's definitely a great time to reset, great time to sit back and just think.
First time working out in like 2 years. I sort of hike into it. Look at you.
yeah, definitely had to watch on for that one, bro. So, quick sidebar. I didn't realize how bad it was. Like, my heart rate was 180 the entire time going up the trail to get to the summit. Like, my heart rate is.
No. What's your resting heart rate?
My heart. I can tell you right now. Give me a second.
I need something to compare it to.
So
you said his lowest?
His resting heart rate.
Resting.
It's probably about 7. Looks like my resting rate is 65.
And so, like, just at a workout at the gym, what is that? You know? off top?
Yeah. So
Like a
probably
regular workout.
At the peak of my set, I don't know my resting during a workout. I'm pretty sure if I go back and I check I probably won't even get an accurate answer based off my workouts because sometimes I forget to cut it off until like 30 minutes after the workout's finished.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know, like at the peak of a set, it typically caps out around the same number, like around 163.
Okay, but you said 180.
Yes, bro. Like that, I'm telling you.
You was fighting
like,
for your life, like the R. Kelly gift.
Bro, I was fighting for my brother is like what 6'2", 6'3" now, so he's taking these long ass steps up the mountain. Like I'm over here struggling. Bro's over here having a full conversation with me while I'm over here breathing heavy as hell. I'm like, man, let me check my heart rate real quick. 180. I didn't even say nothing because I'm like thinking to myself, like, damn. I remember being his age and feeling invincible. Like I remember to this day, like I ran cross country when I was his age, and my heart rate would barely break 100 at times when I was running. And people used to be so mind blown by that. Like my heart rate is 90. We're running 2-3 consecutive miles, and I'm going up a hike, and he's cool, like fresh legs, everything, and I'm over here like, God, hands on my hip, trying to climb up the rocks. I'm like, God damn, like you really do get old. Like you don't feel it as it's happening, but you feel it in certain circumstances. Because I went hiking when I was his age too, and I remember how easy and fun it was. And I was like, God damn, like I'm really getting old or older per se. But yeah, I knocked those 2 recommendations out in one go this past weekend. My recommendation this week comes as a result of like actually getting that peace. And it's like, write down what it is you love to do and work endlessly at getting it done. Like commit yourself to whatever you know your craft is. I know a lot of times, we have circumstances, whether it be 9-to-5s or children or family issues, whatever. But like when you commit yourself to your craft, like all that other shit is just side noise. Like you need to address what you need to address. You need to put in time what you need to put in time for. But like I would challenge everybody that does listen to, figure out what it is you want to do, write it down, what you expect from it, and work tirelessly at getting it done. I know when I personally do that, waking up at 5 a.m. is a lot easier than what it is when I'm, not understanding what my purpose is. Because sometimes when you do write it down, you do lose sight of your end goal, and waking up can be a little bit harder. But when you constantly remind yourself what it is, like I have a note on my, I'm starting to get really big on affirmations. I have a note on my work laptop because work is oftentimes what will get me to, disconnect from what my true end goal in life is. And like I have a sticky note written right under the keypad, and it says, believe in yourself every fucking day. You have the tools to change your life. What are you waiting for? Get after it and don't quit. And I read that shit every time I open up my laptop. So that's a constant reminder for me to stay, committed to what it is that I feel like I'm supposed to do in this life. And, albums are cool, the books are cool, but, words of affirmation and advice on ways to reset and disconnect, whatever, motivated, however you want to, sum this all up. I think that's more, the mental jewels are way better than the albums. The albums will come back, but I'm in a renaissance period. We'll put it that way.
All right. You heard him. Go write a fucking note. Get out of here. But if you guys like the discussion, don't forget to hit the like button. We're going to see you guys next week. Peace.
But while you're here, be sure to check out other great content from the Breakdown crew, including previous episodes of the podcast, Joshua versus Movies, Joshua versus Music, and of course, haven't forgotten about my plant lovers, Feel the Love. Just check out this begonia.